am Mara Webster with In Creative Company, and today I'm so thrilled to be talking to Radhika Apte all about her movie Sister Midnight. And I love the fact that the filmmaker Karan came to you with this idea and this script a few years back, by the sounds of it. And I've heard you talk really effusively about how you just saw this immediate sense of creativity in this character that feels very outside of the box, which is one of the things I loved about the movie. And I was interested in how seeing that sense of creativity in the script really led to the way that you started envisioning how you thought you might play her in the movie.
I have to say how I envisioned it, and I don't quite remember how I did it like 8 years ago when the script came to me. But in general, I remember going to the rehearsal, thinking of something, and then realizing that he had a very different approach to performance, and I did not know how to do it. So the first few days, I'd say 2, 3 days, especially in the rehearsal, were very difficult. I thought I was not going to be able to pull this off. Basically, I normally approach a character by initially intellectualizing it, obviously, before going on the floor and trying to understand where the character came from, have a biography, have the character's history, geography, set in my head. Sometimes I also have a memory bank, and so I work like that. And with Karan, it was like very little information and there was no scope for thought. So why does Uma does something, or she takes and she gets up and suddenly starts doing something, has to be rooted in the body, so, and not in the brain. So before the thought could come to me, I had to have been already doing that, and I didn't know how to do that at all. And but when we rehearsed a few times, I realized that actually it brings a kind of lightness, because you just take the brain out of the process, and everything. So basically, she's an animal, right? Yeah, everything comes from the body and not intellectualized. So it was quite liberating, actually, very different.
I think that's so interesting as well in terms of what you're saying about not necessarily needing to like build out the backstory. And so was it very much a process of finding the character in the presence and not necessarily having to think, where did she grow up? Like, how did her past influence the way that she's going to carry herself through this story?
Yeah, I mean, we had like a 4-line biography, you know what I mean? That probably this happened and this happened, and that was it. And that was quite nice because then we just found her with yeah, with bodily instincts, really. And of course, he knew what Uma was. And from reading the script, I had an impression of what Uma was. But she turned out to be even more, because I thought she was a very innocent soul, but she's even more innocent, even more pure and curious. And it is like an animal or a baby, yeah, yeah.
And I love as well the fact that you had kind of a few days rehearsing where it was just the two of you before the rest of
Yes,
the cast came in.
yes.
And how was that a really unique experience? Because I feel like usually it's bringing everybody together and kind of working through specific scenes. And so how did that really help you in the process of completely readjusting the way that you're used to working?
I mean, the first couple of weeks, it was just him and I. And in the beginning it felt quite intense because Karan and I didn't know each other at all, and then you just go into the room and you're thrown into this totally different process. And because Uma's the film, so I really had to find her. And but then we worked with music to begin with. He had music references for every mood, and so it was really easy to understand what he had in mind through music. I thought it was really clever of him and creative of him to say that that's what this scene is, or that's what this mindset is, or this is Uma in this phase. He also had the film broken down in 12 chapters. I don't remember the chapter names, but they were very interesting names. And so we worked on each chapter. And so that really helped sort of to find Uma. And then when others came in, it was very funny because I had found Uma. I had really gotten along with Karan and figured out what he wanted, and we were having a great time. And other people came in, and I remember because they didn't necessarily speak each other's language, because some people were from Maharashtra, so were spoken Marathi, for example. And Karan's Hindi is not great, and their English wasn't great, and and they used to come to me and say, what is he doing? What are we making? And it was really funny because I was like, I know the feeling, but just hang in there.
And you were mentioning the use of music during that rehearsal process, and obviously there's such great music points and kind of rhythms and beats used in such a great way in the filmmaking process, but also in terms of the rhythm and almost the musicality of the dialogue. I've heard that the script was originally written in English and then translated to Hindi, but it wasn't a direct
Yes,
adaptation because he wanted to keep the rhythm of it. And so I was
yes.
very interested in how rhythm kind of became such a central part of not just the embodiment of the character, but also the rhythm of the dialogue for you.
I mean, if the entire film has a very different rhythm and a particular rhythm, right? I mean, her body movements, her every beat, every look, every the editing is has a rhythm, and so the dialogue was very economic. He done it very economically. So he it was not just the words, but also the sound of it. How much can you hear? Like how much should it be? And so when he translated it, sometimes he wanted this word out or that pronunciation out or something. And I was like, this doesn't make sense in Hindi, but he was fine with it. And actually, that really works.
Yeah, and there's so much where the dialogue is stripped away. It's several minutes into the film before we hear you speak any of the
Yeah.
dialogue. But I think it's so interesting in terms of what that embodies in terms of the performance and what we learn about the character up to that point. And it sounds like you really loved getting to work in that way. And so how did that really lean into finding the character in a very different way, but also a way that you really enjoyed working?
I am originally a theater actor. I really love working with my whole body, and I find it really frustrating sometimes when everything is spelled out because you don't respect the audience much. And I'm trying to write at the moment, write and direct, and I get this feedback sometimes. If you write something in action, they go like, what, how are you going to convey this? Can we just like explain this in dialogue? And I feel that you're not trusting your actors enough. You don't understand that you can be actually conveyed through face and facial and body expressions. And there's so many such things in Sister Midnight, and it was such a treat because then you really get to use your presence and everything that you're doing, and you don't have to spoon feed the subtext. And so it was really lovely. I mean, now I think sometimes that I'd love to do a silent film even, but do you know what I mean? Like, it's so much silence in the film, and it's really lovely.
I mean, I love the way that you kind of describe all those elements as well, and it must have been so interesting to find the physicality of a role like this, because I've heard that even at one point, there was almost a note from him of the emotions coming through the walking, and we should like really feel like the emotions coming through her legs, and there's a little bit more of exaggeration to some of the movements even.
Yeah.
And so, how did you find the physicality a little bit differently as well?
I have to tell you that the first day of rehearsal, we were reading the script. It was just him and I are reading, and page 80 or something, there's this thing where Uma's walking, and he said, let's get up and just let's walk. And I was like, what? Page 80? You want me to on first day walk and convey all this? And I remember I was so stressed. And then we did that walk later on in the film, and I think that's my favorite walk. There's this bit where she has tissue in her ears and she comes home. And I think I really enjoyed that, doing that so much. But her walks are different. Every time she walks, it's different. And we did work on that. Because yeah, she's not here. She's just a force of nature. And she has to, like, when she arrives, you need to know what it is that is going on in that entire body.
I've also heard you talk about how one of the things that you found really interesting in this character is that there's almost this childlike energy and emotion to her. And I was very curious about how that shaped a lot of her because she's kind of very forthright and very strong with a lot of her emotional reactions to things.
Yeah, I think the innocence is very childlike. I mean, to be honest, the film's quite dark. The things she does are quite dark. Not quite, they are dark. And but we still root for her. And that's not because we know her backstory. Because normally when you root for somebody who's going through all this and does all this, it's because of the backstory. You feel like, oh, they've gone through this and this is where it's coming from, but we don't know her backstory. So, and yet you're rooting for her, and that's because of her uh her innocence. And it's not really, it's just coming from her wanting to be free and her wanting to be accepted for who she is, and not be, not doesn't she doesn't want people to impose their norms or rules on her. And there is no manual, so she's just asking questions. I think
It
that's
also
the childlike nature. Sorry, that's what is childlike.
No, it's great. And it also feels like she's very much on a journey of learning about herself as well. She doesn't have a
Yes.
roadmap for stepping into this marriage, running a house, the
Yeah.
expectations that are suddenly being put upon her. And what was that space of really finding the path of how is she going to learn about herself? Because there's this huge internal journey that she goes on throughout the
Yes.
film.
I mean, it is. I think for me, it's coming of age in a way, or it's a story of Uma learning who she is and accepting who she is. But also, the story takes weird turns, right? I mean, she's an outcast, and she's an accidental outlaw at the end of the film. So it's all accidental, plus her own drive to just really like not sort of accept people's as I said, norms. So yeah, I think it is and it's, I mean, if you start thinking about all the people who are outcasts in the society, and in this film they do come together, all the outcasts, the people come together, and they sort of help her eventually, right? And so it's just about how different can you be. And that's how the film takes weird turns, and like she's really different, and she ends up being really different, and then she really owns it. So yeah, it is a film about a girl accepting and owning who she really is.
And even with what you just described about there's this sense of community around her later on in the film, it doesn't start that way for her. She's
No.
very much alone and isolated and not necessarily looking to engage with the world outside, but then
No.
gradually lets people in. And how did you feel like even just the relationship that she has with her neighbor and kind of being like,
Yeah.
actually, I think I do need you. And it's just this little exchange of goods that's her way of saying, maybe there could be something here. How did you
Yeah.
feel like that really opened her up in a lot of ways to then let more people in the rest of the story?
I mean, it's such a beautiful relationship with the neighbor, because such an odd relationship, right? I mean, that neighbor is such an oddball, and Chaya is such a fantastic actor. So we used to crack up when she'd start performing, honestly. And yeah, I mean, she I think meets her match in a way, and that's what brings them together, and their idea of their understanding of their life and monotony, and idea of companionship is very much alike, because they're again not imposing things on each other at all. And they're just quite independent. And I think so that's the beginning. And I think and then you see her flourish as she meets more people, but again, people who don't view her with any lens.
Yeah, and even the relationship with her husband and the way that kind of opens up is quite interesting as well because she's very critical of him and she pushes back on him a lot, but it doesn't completely push him away. He kind of is like, okay, well, how can we change things a little bit? Here's something I can maybe teach you. And it's beautifully imperfect between them, but I love the way that they kind of crack each other open a little bit. And so how do you feel like he opened her up as much as she opened him up in a way?
Absolutely. At one point, Karan and I were actually talking, and we said that it's actually a love story. It's also is a love story, and he's as innocent as she is, and which is why when we call this a feminist fable, I think Karan's feminine. Every character is feminist in a way. Like he has empathy for every character. It's not just about a woman. And the husband's so beautiful and so sweet. He's really trying, because he's also lost, but he doesn't allow himself the freedom to question things like with such strength. And Uma does, because she doesn't give a shit about anybody else, whereas he does, and he's trying to fit in, but he's equally lonely and equally confused about what to do and how to make a marriage work. And so I think it's really beautiful when she thinks that what's going to break their marriage actually brings them together.
Yeah, definitely. And you know, she kind of also finds her own way of figuring out independence and what that looks like, you know, suddenly seeing her jumping on the train and looking for a job and getting offered a job as a cleaner. And I love that scene where she's first mopping for the first time and just has absolutely no idea what she's doing.
Yeah,
And so I wanted
yeah.
to ask you about just finding those moments where she's so out of her depth and doesn't necessarily know what she's doing or how to approach it, but the way that you could almost find this comedic humor in beats like that as well.
I mean, it's literally, again, it comes from Karan's de-intellectualizing it, right? Because she's frustrated and then she just goes to a railway station and she finds a map and she says, I want to go there. And then she goes there and then she realizes this is not the place for us, for her. Then it's literally not planned. It's not planned. And everything just happens like, I saw this light, I'm just going to follow that. Or, and instinctively, whatever feels right. And she does that. And I think that's what makes that happen.
And it also carries her to such a different space from when we first see her at the
Yeah.
beginning. And I remember hearing Karen talk about how he almost wanted her to feel very ornate and like an ornament at the
Yeah.
beginning. And so what was your experience of discovering her in that way at the beginning, but then finding the version of her that's suddenly, you know, taking this cleaning job, jumping on the train and mopping around because it's so different in terms of the emotional shift and the physical shift.
Um, Yeah, I mean, I think she's just trying everything out I think because in the beginning she's trying to be a bride, then she's trying to be a wife when she tries to cook, then she's really trying to be, she cleans and do all the domestic, like what the jobs that a woman is expected to know how to do. That's when she said that I'm the goddess of domestic jobs, like I know how to do it. So she really gives it a try, she tries everything and then she just basically exhausted. She's like, I'm not this. And then something else happens. And then she realized that, oh, that's where I'm headed to. But yeah.
And once there is that sense of trust and kind of having told her husband something about the journey that they're going to go on, I love that sequence where it's the two of them with one of his colleagues and the wife and the dog on the beach, and then she's just like, I'm going to take the dog for a walk, and then she just gives it away to another family, but also just the silent communication that she has with her husband. She's, you know, they're able to kind of communicate without saying anything to the other couple, and he's completely on board. Did you feel like at that moment in the story she's just in a completely different space in terms of her own embodiment, but also what it means to have him by her side in that way?
Absolutely. I mean, I think that just happens after the big reveal, and she suddenly realized that he's probably going to be on board, right? In the sense that equation changes and they're a team now, and so it's the first time. I mean, they've not been able to communicate throughout. Like they've always missed, and they've just never been able to have a single conversation. And now they're speaking without words. So they're really a team, and I thought that's where she gets the confidence from as well. I think when he's by her side, and it's adventure. Now this is like a journey of like romance. Like I think for me that's romance, that entire chapter.
Yeah, no, I definitely agree with you. There's also so much great imagery in terms of the first time that she's sitting in the house and the bird comes in and flies around and kind of smacks into the wall, but then gets back up again, and the goat imagery throughout. And I just wanted to ask about getting to film that and some of the conversations that you had with Karan about how you wanted those to feel, because I feel like again that really leads into the physical side, and it's just you in those moments in those scenes.
Oh, well, I mean, Karan had the entire film storyboarded, right? So every frame you see is painted. And every day when we went on set, there was this whole board with like everything on it. And I'd seen them before. And so I knew how the birds were going to move and how the goats were going to move. And Karan assisted me with sound. So he was the goats and he was the birds, and he would make the right sounds according to the movement, and so it was actually really funny to do that. And I had a great time, especially with the goats later on. Just like miming the whole thing was we just basically made sure that we know exactly what the movement is, of obviously for the technical teams to do that. But yeah, it was really fun.
I I mean, I love all of those details, and I think especially like the humor and the comedy in this film is so specific and beautifully crafted. Did you have a sense of how that side of the film and that side of the character would feel early on, or again, was that very much the rehearsal process really bringing it out in the script for you?
To be very honest with you, Karan had that rhythm and that comedy, that humor in his script right when I read it. And actually, recently, I sort of just went back and saw the script again. And it's amazing that he's retained every bit of it. So, I think we did like a circle. You start with knowing exactly what it's going to be, and then you go in the rehearsal process, you explore things, you shoot, and you watch your film again, and you read the script, you go like, this is exactly how it read, actually. So I didn't, but then I did. I didn't have an idea of how it's going to be play out, but I did actually. I just didn't realize that it's quite there, like it's completely there.
I love that. And then I also wanted to talk just a little bit about that ending sequence of the film, kind of potentially stepping into spoiler territory, but that makeover sequence in the train bathroom, because it feels so
Yeah.
transformational and it feels like such a accumulation of everything that you've built in terms of Uma's journey really coming together in that scene. And so, how did you approach a moment like that? Because it kind of really brings together the whole story.
Actually, we were supposed to shoot that toilet bathroom scene in India, but we ran out of time that day. And thank God we did, because I mean, no offense, but Indian toilets are very smelly and very small. And so we shot that sequence in Scotland. So till that point, it was still in our heads. And I was just visualizing how it was going to be. And then there's one shot, which I don't want to spoil it, but there's one shot, which is a bit of a reveal shot. And he hadn't told me that he was going to do that shot. And he told me over the phone, she said, Rads, I'm going to just do this. And I thought it was a great idea. But when I saw it, it was perfect. It was so perfect. It just brings everything together, doesn't it? And it's really cheeky and it's very cool. So I remember I never take selfies. I hate taking selfies. And that was the day I took so many selfies.
I love it. You've done such a phenomenal job in this performance, and I love how it was such a different experience, but so creatively gratifying. So, congratulations
Thank
on the
you.
movie. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much.